Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're joined by the man who is known as the Raging Bull. He played for England 73 times and captained them to a World Cup final 2007. He was also a winning celebrity at MasterChef in 2011. He's continued his love for cooking and has opened his very own restaurant at number 3. It is, of course, Mr. Phil Vickery. Phil, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. No, lovely to be on. Good to have. I'm looking forward to having a chat.
It'll be good. Well, I guess it recently announced that there's not going to be any grassroots rugby until 2021. What sort of effect do you think this will have on rugby as a game in England?
I think it's probably, for me, one of my biggest concerns, because I know there's been some talk this week in papers and Premiership rugby clubs talking about going bust, without any fans and things. But kind of the traditionalist in me, thinking I fell in love with the game of rugby, going to my local rugby club, who are so dependent on the grassroots, where I come from, where it all started for me. I'm worried, but actually not just rugby. I think sports centres in general, and it's just a real worry. And I think our game needs. Keep bringing those next generations through. You need to. I've got a son who plays and really enjoys playing rugby, and I think the challenges around that, the well-being, mental health, camaraderie, part of your club, local community. A rugby club. I keep saying to people, a lot of friends of mine who aren't rugby fans, I say that's fine. You don't have to understand rugby, but the rugby club in its community is so important. And it is a real worry. It's a concern, but I don't know the answers. I just think, but also longer term for our game too. We get in habits, and you think by the time rugby potentially is going to come back online for general public as far as amateur rugby is concerned, we've learned to do different things on Saturdays, on Sundays. Training on a Tuesday or Thursday, and suddenly it's like, actually, do I want to go back to rugby? So that really does concern me.
And obviously, focusing more on you now, you had a career with lots of highs and some lows, and one of the biggest lows would probably be that tour from hell, the late 1990s. Obviously, you went on that as quite a young player. How did you sort of take the experience as such a difficult introduction to professional international rugby?
I think, for me, it was a fantastic experience because I'd never been to those countries before, so it was a little bit. I was 21. I'd just been capped that February. I think I got my first cap against Wales in February, and I was 20, which for a prop was, in those days, in '98. That was a big deal. I think I got banned because I punched somebody. So I missed the following game or two, or something like that happened, and then I was on tour to go to Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. 5 weeks, and we played. We flew straight into Australia. No warm up game. Played Australia first. We lost 76-0. So that was my second cap for England, and it was Johnny Wilkinson's first cap for England, believe it or not. So if you could imagine, first up, first off. And one thing I will always remember about that game more than anything, apart from the fact that I remember chasing shadows and not really seeing anyone in an Australian shirt, I remember there were sponsors. I think it was either Castlemaine or a beer. It was a beer sponsor, or Bundaberg or something like that. And for every time the Australians scored, they had to do press-ups. So there's 15, 20 guys on the side of the pitch doing press-ups every time Australia scored. I just remember it got into the second half and they had to stop doing press-ups and go to the sit-ups because they couldn't do any more press-ups. And that always sat with me. But then we went on to New Zealand, and we played the first test in Dunedin. Tane Randall was captain at the time, and got beat, but it wasn't quite as bad. I think it was it wasn't quite as bad. I think it was like 40 or 50 points. And then we went to Auckland. It was actually Sean Fitzpatrick. He had a testimonial game because he'd retired. And I just remember that's the first time I played against John Olomu. And I remember seeing John Olomu, and I remember seeing him on the field and thinking, wow. And I actually tackled him in that game. And I felt quite proud that I tackled him. I think we lost. I don't know. It was 30. It was less than the first test. We played New Zealand Maori, I think it was midweek, or an A game in Hamilton. John Mitchell, who was actually forwards coach then, who funny enough is now coaching back with England, he threatened to shoot us all. He said if he had a gun, he'd shoot us all. That was a fantastic experience. And then we finished off in South Africa and we lost 18-0 in Newlands against a decent South African team. And it was, I think you go through those experiences, and what happened certainly for me was I came back. Now it's actually quite easy to come back and go, right, do you know what? It doesn't really matter. Wasn't a full strength team. You can still be a superstar at your club in Gloucester. It's a small town. You can be a big fish in a small pond and no one will really mind. Or you can look at it and go, actually, right, that's what the best look like. What do you want to be known as? What's your real ambition here? And I think not necessarily those exact words, but I think it was the same for Clive Woodward. When you think what Clive did post that tour, we had the '99 Rugby World Cup, which I was involved in, and really after it was, although the game went professional in '96. It was still amateur professional all the way up really until the '99 Rugby World Cup, when the foundation stones started to be set. And really once '99 Rugby World Cup was out of the way, that was then when we started, forwards coach, but scrum coach, line-out coach, defensive coach, more analytical, just really the footprint, really, which is now professional rugby. And Clive started that. So that tour, although it was a terrible experience as a player and as a human being because of what happened, actually it kind of showed up, or it showed me, or it made me actually evaluate and look at what am I about? Because I always say to people, I'm getting quite deep now, I don't mean to get deep, but if I had to give some advice to people, you know what, there's some tremendously skilled, fantastic athletes, got all the skill sets, it's about what's inside you and what's going to drive you. And the higher up the ladder you go, no matter whether that's business or sport or whatever it is, it's about that it's what's inside there which will get you there. Yes, of course you need the skill sets to go with it, but it's what's there. Because if you're just going to do the bits and in that classroom and tick those boxes and KPIs and don't touch anything, we'll all be safe, it's a load of old rubbish. You've got to, if you want to progress and want to get on in the world, then you've got to push yourself. And I know I waffle on a bit, but it was a horrible experience in the sense of what it was, but actually for me, it actually defined, I think, me and my career and what I went on to achieve from that.
Absolutely. I remember one thing that was quite sort of prominent within that tour from hell is that there was quite a lot of influence from the press, and sort of negative press in particular, sort of talking about it. How did you find as a player, sort of, I guess generally throughout your career and at that time, sort of the press and how it impacted your game?
I think the press is, I feel slightly lucky in the sense that my career, it's slower. Like today, things happen very, very quickly and overnight, and you can be kind of nobody and then suddenly thrust in the limelight, and it's kind of, you're expected to know these things, let alone like social media and people being able to get hold of you and, wanting to have a footprint in that world. So, but I remember, the press, obviously, it hurts you, and it doesn't matter how many times you will hear people say, I don't read the press, I don't take any notice. You bloody well do, because it's there, and people remind you of it all the time. Doesn't matter whether, even like now, to put it in perspective, my last game for Gloucester Rugby was in 2006. I think it was 2006 season, 5-6 season. I still get abused in Tesco's now when I go shopping if Gloucester aren't doing very well. And that's just Gloucester, because they see you and they vent. But I feel lucky that because I came up, it was slowly and it wasn't quite as mainstream and social media, I was protected to a degree. But I also was quite quiet. I didn't kind of bite too much on stuff. And you just learn to deal with it. I think the hardest ones were actually it's based more on your family, because your family read it, and your family get upset, and like when you're a 20-year-old kid and your mum's phoning you up crying because she's read articles from a certain journalist, that's more upsetting than the actual article. And also a bit later in life with children, and the kids are quite cruel sometimes in things they say, but it's all part and parcel. I treat people the way that I want to be treated. There is an element of when you're in that limelight, the responsibility, and with that comes the fact, and you can't have it both ways. You can't have it one minute you want to be known and famous and commercial activity and be profiteering from it, and then suddenly 2 minutes later, I never asked for this. So I take what is 99% of journalists and people were pretty good. It's slightly different for the guys now because people can make personal attacks on you through so many more different channels, and which is different. But like I said, I was always fairly good, and actually I had a great relationship with the press guys. I used to have good fun with them, and even like today, I consider someone to be not like you phone them all the time, but friends and people that you interacted with each other. It wasn't for me. It wasn't like a them and us too much. It was, you were kind of all in it together. They'd go away on tour with you. They'd be there for the whole time, and they understood you, and you actually got to know them as human beings.
Mm. So we'll move on to slightly more positive aspects of your career. And obviously, 2003 must have been, or probably was, the best moment of your career. Then obviously in 2007 you led the England side. We were wondering what sort of did it change from being a player in a final in 2003 to being the captain in 2007?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I was actually with Martin Johnson in the week, and we were talking about stuff. And I still say to this day, one of the most nerve-wracking experiences I think I've ever had. Bear in mind, I'd captained England. We'd won Barbarians games, which were the warm-ups of tours and things like 2001, 2000, and I'd done bits and pieces there. I'd captained England against Argentina in Buenos Aires when John didn't go, and we beat them over there, which was an amazing game to be involved in. I remember Dave Flatman was playing. He had a really, really good game, and Steve Thompson. It was just, anyway, but the point about John is I remember being in Rugby World Cup 03, and I got asked to captain England against Uruguay because Martin was rested. But I was so nervous, and I said this to him on Thursday evening, because you have all your peers there. So bear in mind, at a time in that team that we were in, when you think about captains, so obviously Martin, Lawrence Delalia was there, Neil Back was there, Jason Robinson was there, Johnny Wilkins was there, Mike Catt was there. Everyone was there, but he chose me. And I remember the final, like the end of the week before the game, like the Friday night before the Saturday, or whatever the day was, the coaches do their little bit, and then they leave the captain to speak to his players. So you can imagine me looking around that room with all the big guns in it, and me being me, and just being myself. Like, I just didn't know what to say. I won't tell you what I said because I don't want to use bad language, but it was to the point of, we were under some pressure. The coaches had done a fantastic presentation. We'd done a little bit of a movie, the soundtrack and all the good bits, a little bit of feel good, and I was pumped. I was like, I'm ready to go to war here. And I remember saying, I won't use exact words. I said when Clive and the coaches left, I just remember saying along the lines of, whatever they've said means nothing. It's about us tomorrow going out with a smile on our faces and actually really enjoying each other's company and going out and playing rugby. And I was literally, that was it. It was 30 seconds. And all the boys got like that, yeah! And I kind of, it always sat with me, people, I don't know, but I am very much me, and that's not about necessarily wanting to like or whatever. It's just I'm very authentic to me in the way that I lead and the way that I captain.
Obviously, you've touched on that, but obviously, can you talk through, so Rugby World Cup final games tend to kick off later in the day or in the evening. How do you as a player sort of go about what happens during the day of the final? How do you keep yourself occupied?
I think by the time we'd got to the final, there were lots of very sore bodies. Training actually is very tapered. It's, you're not learning new skills in training. You're not coming up with huge amounts of different variations. You're looking at subtle plays or opportunities where there might be somewhere you could exploit as a team. But you're just, all you're doing is getting yourself physically, mentally ready to go out on Saturday night and pull up trees. Really, that's what it's about. I don't think we didn't scrummage that week. What we did, it was just more about timing. But I think it's long days, particularly the evening kickoffs. I was lucky because Clive was very proactive with girlfriends and wives. And my girlfriend was with me, now wife, so she'd come out. So at least I had company and Kate. We could go and do things and walk. But there's only so many walks and cups of coffee. And the problem with the final week, particularly the final couple of weeks, you couldn't go out anywhere because you were mobbed. We were staying over at Manly. The Manly Pacific, it was called then. I actually went there about 18 months ago when I was over doing some work, and I actually caught the ferry from Sydney, went over to Manly, went to the hotel because that was the first time that I'd been back, and I forget what it's called now. It's still there, but it's a different name. But it was just, you just have to be careful. I think some of the best advice I was given, and I would always give to any aspiring athletes, girls and boys at any level of anything, is you have to be so careful because you lose so much energy up here. It's not the physical, it's up here. And if you can learn to cope with that and be quite, sounds quite boring, but you've got to be so strict because it's just about conservation of energy, understanding your roles, running through in your head what's going on, but also resting, sleeping. And for me, probably the wrong thing to say, I like doing other stuff, do other things. Go out, go for a meal, have a glass of red wine, have a beer, take your wife out or your girlfriend out and go. Just go and be normal, or if you just become institutionalized because you're that into it and it's that, the detail, everything's sorted out. And it was an incredible environment to be in, but it was a pressure cooker too. So, and there was a lot of humour going on amongst the boys, lots of banter, lots of messing around. But it was a tough one. I remember being exhausted. Just the mental toughness, and it was just an incredible experience to be part of.
So I guess you've touched on Clive a few times. What was your experience with him as a coach? Because obviously it's a bit of a hot and cold for some people.
Yeah, well, but listen, I think we all need to wake up and smell the coffee sometimes when it comes to coaches, because not everyone gets on or is best buddies with the coach. We all have differences of opinion. We all, don't necessarily always agree, and that's the same. Clive, as a coach, he was on the field. He had a vision of what he wanted, but actually the coaches coached. Clive managed, and and for me, he did a fantastic job. He was. I find Clive very straightforward. If you're prepared to give everything you've got, he will give you the best thing. So that was his thing. You stayed in the best hotels, had the best treatment, best foods, best coaches, best kit, the best physio, the best training programs. No one talks about Dave Redding and the fitness guys. They were just unbelievable what he got us, and the way that he treated us. The trade-off is you had to do it. And I think I had a great relationship with Andy Robinson, Phil Keith Roach, our scrum coach, who's just one of the best human beings I think I've ever met, that you just want to run through brick walls for. And suddenly you start bolting on, Dave Allred, and you start Brian Ashton, my involvement. He was one of the best coaches I've ever worked with, Brian Ashton. He was unbelievable. And then Clive at the top, overseeing all that with, Simon Kemp and the medical team, Barney Kenny, and all those guys. And it was a team effort. And yes, I got on really, really well with Clive. We don't come from similar backgrounds, but we shared a vision. Whatever anyone says about Clive, he wanted to win. And do you know what? I wanted to bloody well win as well. And he gave me the confidence and gave me the tools to be able to be the best that I could be. And for him, I would run through brick walls because he backed me, and he identified this Cornish, slightly Springer Spaniel, enthusiastic young lad who's a tight head prop, and said, right, I like him. I'm going to invest in him. I'm going to give him all the tools, and I'm going to give him the opportunity. You just got to step forward and put the shoes on and go and take it with you. So, and if I was to phone Clive tomorrow and say, Clive, I need your help, he'd be there, the same as I would, the same as Martin was for me last week. And I think that's a special, a special sign. Would Clive methods? We spent Clive's methods where it didn't work in two with the Lions tour, and it's not. I wasn't saying it necessarily fits all, but don't underestimate. Even when you look at professional rugby that is today, that blueprint of professional rugby is still what Clive started, 20 years ago. That's remarkable. I think it's he was way ahead of the curve.
And so obviously the 2003 guys who obviously you went on to win, you were also close because most of you have been on tour from Held Under. Were there any stories like how close you guys were, especially like after winning the World Cup? Can you talk us through the emotions you went through?
Well, I think it was just a very, very special time, and the reality is you all go about your business. You all go about your business when it finishes. But I think the opportunity, and it's probably the wrong thing to say to you guys, but you remember the rugby, of course you do. You remember the occasions, and I will never forget the stadium in Australia for that final. And I'll remember it not for rugby. I'll remember it for the fans. The white shirts, the flags. It was just incredible. And I wasn't particularly nervous about the final because you kind of there, and I didn't think about it. It was just the fans. But thinking about the lads, it's more about coming home and being able to celebrate with people. And you're a world champion, and coming back to Heathrow, that experience at Heathrow and the people, and and I said to Martin, I remember the security guard. We got because we flew on a BA plane, but it was full of fans and people, and that World Cup was going up and down the plane. It was like a big party and I remember someone saying, "Well, what happens if it gets?" I said, "Where's it going to go? We're on an airplane. It can't really go very far." So the World Cup's going up and down. Everyone's saying they're coming back. We arrived at Heathrow, and I remember a security guard coming and saying that we couldn't. It was something to do with the safety because of the amount of people that were in the terminal that wanted to see us. And he said, "You're not allowed in there." Well, you can imagine what Martin Johnson said. I won't tell you what he said. I just remember him grabbing the World Cup and walking around the corner, and he said, "We are going through there." I remember walking around the corner and just tens of thousands of people just going mad. And that's what I remember. And I remember going to Buckingham Palace, and I remember doing the open top bus tour with all those people. And it had never been done before, all the people there, going to Downing Street, meeting Tony Blair and, the PMs and all them. It was, and for me, being sat in Winston Churchill's room at number 10, or his favourite room, I'm sat there going, wow, walking up the stairs with all the Prime Minister's pictures as you go up in time. It was just magical. But also from the guys' point of view, this is going to sound really weird to you guys now, but when I meet one of the lads that I won the thing with, the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. Even though I'm talking to you, the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. And I can't help it. It's because you've done something super special with super special people. And I know I'm emotional, and I know, all that kind of stuff, but that really means something. Like it's just something which, because regardless of what anyone says about you and the people, like, You do things on a rugby field for people that you can't explain to people. And people say, "Don't be so silly, Phil. What are you talking about?" But they know, they know, and I don't mean fighting or biting somebody or whatever. I've done plenty of that, but you've gone beyond. You've gone above and beyond the call of what just being a teammate is about. and you've helped someone when they're at their lowest, and they're in it, they're in the shit, and you're there for them. And I think that's and probably the thing that you miss most, and that's not just at international level. That's at all levels of rugby, and that's a special thing. That's a special bond, and you'll never forget those moments. You'll never get them back. It was that moment in that time with those people, and it was just the most amazing, surreal experience to have been part of. If you could imagine the conversation that I had with my mum, who was a lady who sort of drove me around the country in our little Fiesta, up and down, doing their kids' trials and all the stuff which people never see and talk about too much. And I'm sat, on the phone to my mum, and she's at home in Cornwall, and I'm in Australia, in Sydney, and I've become a world champion. It's like, wow, special memories.
I guess in your book you mentioned sort of this World 15 that you put together, so a list of 15 names. Starting off with Jason Leonard, Sean Fitzpatrick, Oliver Brown, Martin Johnson, Ian Jones, Richard Hill, Finley Calder, Zinzan Brooke, Gareth Edwards, Michael Liner, Joan Lowe, Tim Horan, Jeremy Gusker, Jeff Wilson, and Jason Robinson. Would you add or change any of those names today?
No, I wouldn't. Listen, I could spend days thinking about, and you think there's loads of others, but it's just, I'm very blessed to have, because I was young when I started, so I actually played against people I watched on BBC Grandstand who were my heroes. So I caught the careers of like a Jerry Gusker, who I watched as a kid. I just managed to play with Jerry because I was a baby coming in the team. And, I managed to play against like Brian Moore, but it's at club level, not international. So I crossed over with some really special people. And the reason I put like Finley Calder and Sean I just caught Sean Fitzpatrick. Sean Fitzpatrick, I played for an England select team. That was the autumn of '97. He was trying to get back to fitness for the All Blacks touring. And I played against him down at Bristol at Ashton Gate, so he was like a hero because I used to watch him as a kid. I actually played against him. But one like Finley Calder, the reason I put like Finley, because I remember watching the Lions videos, and I remember watching the Lions video Australia, I think it was 89, like Living with Lions or whatever it was called. I just remember hearing him speak, and I remember watching some of the VT stuff. I remember thinking, wow, never met the guy. I've met him since to say hello to, but I've never met the guy. I was thinking, I want to play with you, sunshine. God, I'd play for you. And then I remember seeing the VTs when you had, like Wade Dooley, fighting someone, and Mike Teague, who was a hero of mine, there, and Robert Jones, and all those guys, and Gareth Chilcott, and it was just, I don't know, just I'd love to have been around,
Yeah,
but there's so many. I mean, I say the best player I've ever played with, some best players for different reasons, but one of the best rugby players that I think I've ever graced the field with. Forget about John Olomu because I didn't play with him, play against him, but Jason Robinson for me was he is the greatest rugby player I think I ever played with. But then he was kind of a hero of mine before that because I used to watch him playing for Wigan. Because I used to love watching Wigan play and used to love watching rugby league. So, I'm just very blessed to have played alongside and with and against, I think, some of the all-time greats of our game. And I feel very, very privileged to have done that.
That's really interesting. Well, it'd be criminal of us to have you on and not talk quickly about cooking and food. And obviously, it's a big passion of yours. Can we ask, why cooking? Are there any parallels which you draw between rugby and cooking?
Well, I think, where I came from, particularly where I grew up, down in North Cornwall, the Bute Rugby Club views a very rural town. But I think rugby in general in Cornwall, Devon, is very much based around rural, which, farming and rugby are very, very closely linked. They're huge parts of the community. And I think, yes, it's not cooking and obviously going on doing MasterChef, but I think they're the same people, quite passionate. They care about what they do. I've always cared about what it is that I do. And even today, I've just been up the road for me a couple of miles and see Jamie Guy because he's just started keeping some Gloucester Old Spot sausage, and I went up to have some pigs. So I was thinking about the Old Spot. I'm thinking about the number 3 in a restaurant in chat. I'm thinking, right, it's all low impact. He's got some Gloucester cattle, which he's just starting. And my love of food and cooking actually comes from, being that farmer, growing up with, my family farm, having our own gardens, growing things. I was always very I'm a husband in the sense that farming I never really got off on driving tractors, although I enjoyed it. It was more about animals for me, and I like to make things and breed things and see an end product. And that side of, yes, and I love cooking. Of course, I love cooking. I love my baking, and I just love making. I think John Torode summed me up really well at the end of MasterChef when he said, Phil loves to cook to make people smile. And I think, do you know what? I do. I love making things or doing things to make people smile. Nothing makes me happier like being in restaurant. Like I was in restaurant last night, and you've got a table of 6 of a family, and then because it's very much about small place and sharing. And there's conversation going on, talking, chatting, eating good food, people laughing, smiling, talking. And I love that about food. I love the whole bit. I like to know where my food's come from. I like it to be cooked well. Of course, textures, flavors, contrasts. But it's people you're with, and friendships, and beers, and wines, and drinks, and juices. It's the whole bit, really. I just love food. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't bother me if it's a ham and cheese sandwich. Because I'll tell you what, a good ham and cheese sandwich is a beautiful thing. I don't look down on food. I just love everything about food. And some of the stories, boys, I tell you, even like today, going and seeing Jamie, he's got a little small holding up there. Just started out. He's been dry stone walling Cotswold stone his whole life. And to cut, I want to tell you his life story, but he's still working heavy horses. He's got heavy horses up there. And he's working heavy horses. He's still got his plough, got his harrow, and then you look at the Gloucester, the Old Spot, the pigs. Then you look at he's got some Gloucester cattle, and then he's got some. And you think, but no one really knows about him, and he's all about low impact. It's about environment. It's working with the countryside, and I just love that. Like at restaurant, like the guys who I get all my fish comes up from Cornwall. And well, I'll take you a step further back than that. I got a message from a guy who does charcuterie, Dutchy charcuterie. A couple of years ago it was. He said, "Phil, would you give me a post?" I haven't got very many followers and stuff on Instagram. I'm quite new to it. I don't really understand it, but I do a bit. I said, he plays prop plays number 3 in Red Roof. So I'm like that. Of course, I might put a post out for you. To cut a long story short, I'm now selling his charcuterie in restaurant because he's doing an amazing job, started his own business, doing it himself. He's winning awards. And then I had another lady ring up who saw that my breakfast, my Phil's breakfast was going out with black pudding. Why have you got no white pudding? Well, the Primrose Herd in Cornwall, who's just down the road from Mark, she's sending up white pudding because you can't have his breakfast going out without any white pudding. So she's selling that up. And the fish, the Porphyry shellfish boys who are in the Camel Estuary there, producing some world-leading oysters, and that's in my restaurant. I had someone last night had a monkfish on the bone, and we cooked the grits on it. And I want to come back next week for that. Well, you might not get it because it's all day boat. It's what's caught and comes up, and all that story. I know I go on and people laugh about it, but I love that. It just makes me feel so good inside that all the girls and boys of people producing, making some of the most amazing things, and you can eat it.
Completely. Well, Phil, I think that's a great place to finish. Listening all about that, it's really fascinating. I understand why your love's so great. But just on behalf of me and Matt and all our listeners, we'd love to thank you for coming on. It's been really great talking about food and rugby.
Yeah, who knew you could join?
No worries. Lovely chatting to you guys. Really appreciate it. If you ever need me any other time or you want a voice, or just get hold of me. Happy to help out. But stay safe and look after yourselves, okay?
Well, thank you very much.